In this video, I'm going to share how I've come up with steps that work for me to make friends. I don't mean just the general theoretical steps. I'll talk about those in a second, what those actually are, but how we take those general steps and actually apply them to day-to-day life. So I'm like, okay, today I'm going to do this 4 times, check. Tomorrow I'm going to do that 5 times, and then after that I'm going to do this. So they're very practical, checklistable steps, not these things that are like,
well, meet people, step number 1.
You know, like that's not really super helpful. We want something very specific that works for you specifically, and I'm going to just go through what I did to come up with steps for me personally. If you don't know who I am, my name is Marshall Jones Jr. I help busy adults make friends they actually enjoy with the fastest friendship course online. If you're interested in that, you can check out the link below in the description. Other than that, we'll get right into the rest of the video here. So the problem with YouTube tips about friendship and so forth is you get a tip and it's just kind of like by itself out there in the world. And you're like, well, where do I apply this? How does this work? What we really need to actually move the needle and make friends is to have a system that works, that we can implement, and we can actually just process through the system, and at the end it spits out friends at the end, and we're close friends. Wouldn't that be awesome if that were how it worked? Turns out it can actually work like that. A lot of times we go through life and friendships don't just work out for us, and we're like, oh, this, you know, the systems and so forth, they can't work. Well, it can. You just have to think of it in a different way. You have to think of it as a system as opposed to just somebody that you're randomly running into in your life and somehow, you know, making friends like that. So the way that I kind of started thinking about this in terms of systems is to first just ask myself, you know, what are the steps to making friends? If you've heard me talk about the friendship ladder, you know there are 4 steps that I talk about. The first one is figuring out, like, where are these people? Where am I? Like, are they meeting out on a soccer field? Are they, you know, in coffee shops? Like, are they online? Where are the people that I want to meet hanging out? Step number 2 is figuring out, what do you share in common with them? What are maybe some common interests, maybe some common beliefs, those sorts of things. So you talk about that. And then from there, you get into not just common interests out there in the world, like, hey, I like soccer, they like soccer, that kind of thing. I actually don't like soccer. But as an example, we both like soccer, cool, we share that. And then we start talking about things that are just personal to each other, our stories. Like, well, how did you get into liking soccer? Well, I like soccer because as a kid, I grew up playing with my older brothers, and that's how I like soccer, or whatever it is, right? And so you start to share these sort of stories about each other. And finally, as you get into that further and further, you develop into where you're able to share almost everything with each other. You develop this transparency where you're not afraid to share things that are maybe a little bit intimate, a little bit scary, a little bit something that you just wouldn't share with a random stranger. So those are kind of the 4 steps. But the question really is, how do we take these general steps and turn them into practical things that we can do? Like I said earlier, like today I'm going to do this 3 times, and I'm going to do this 2 times, and then tomorrow I'm going to do this, and then over time this will end up creating friends. And then not only that, but because I could tell you like my steps, but how do we have steps that apply to you, like that you can work through? Because a lot of times you hear something and you're like,
well, that won't really work for me.
And let me tell you, if you're saying that won't really work for me, I've tried that and it doesn't work, that's probably not the mindset of a high-achieving person or a person who's going to be successful with these things. But if you're here and you're watching this video and you've made it this far, then you've probably already gotten past that point and you're like, okay, well, what are the steps? How can I develop these steps in my life that will help me move toward making friends in my life? So you start to look back in your own life. This is the first thing that I would suggest. And this is what I would say, this is what I did personally, but it's also what I would do if we were sitting down one-on-one and I was trying to help you figure out how to do this for yourself. So number 1, think of, okay, what has already worked? Right? What has already worked? What can I look back on in my own life? Are there friendships that I made, even if they were friendships for only 2 weeks while I was on that vacation, summer break, in school, however far back in your life you have to go? Come up with some examples, hopefully a few examples, not just one, but hopefully, you know, 2, 3, whatever. Come up with some examples of times where you did have good connections with people, and try to write down, I like to write down because then you can see it afterward, write down all the ways that you saw that you made friends with them. Like, what were the things that you did? Did you hang out together? Did you share lunch together? Did you, you know, all those sorts of things. How did you make friends in those cases? The next thing I would suggest is look to other folks. Like, are there people that you see, maybe people you know or just people that you see that have made friends? How did they make friends? right? This one's a little bit harder because it's for somebody else, so there might be little nuances in there that you're not able to see, where they're responding to, an email, and you don't necessarily see that correspondence. You're just like, well, they made these friends easily. How does that happen? But you can, in general, kind of come up with some ideas of how people have made friends, how they've made, especially initial connections and so forth. And you can ask people as well, right? You can ask people, well, how did you make friends with this person? So number one, come up with ways, or think about ways that you've made friends in the past. And then number two, ask around, look around, see how are other people making these friends in their life. Once you have these two lists, you can start to look through them and kind of see some themes. And at first it might just be a big splattering of this is all the things that happened, but then you can kind of order them in sort of chronological order. Like, what do I have to do first, right? Like, maybe I have to meet people. Okay, then I have to do this, and then I have to do that, and then I have to do this, right? And then what you see is it's actually pretty simple. Like, the stuff that happens, like, you have to meet somebody, right? Like, at some point, to be friends, you probably have to meet people. You can have relationships where it's all online. Maybe you're Zooming or Skyping or whatever it is that you're using to connect face to face, but it's online. That can work also. But in general, what are the things, right? You start to put them in order and you start to realize, okay, these are some commonalities. And then this is the part that we don't want to talk about a lot, because a lot of times we're like, I just don't have any friends, whatever. And a lot of times you might be actually doing the things that you need to do to make friends. You're just not doing it enough. Let me give an example of that, right? If I meet 10 people in a given year that are new to me, I might only become friends with 1 or 2 of those people. So sometimes it might just be simply that you're like,
hey, I don't have any friends, I don't know how to make friends.
It's like you've only interacted with like 10 new people in your life. It's super easy to go an entire month and only talk to like maybe 1 new person in your life. But if you want to start making new friends, you have to increase the level of activities in a lot of cases. Not to say all the time, not to say it's you just need to meet more people, whatever. That might not be the actual thing. But that does bring me to my 4th step. And that would be, as you start to see like, okay, I need to increase the number of these activities to start to make friends, you'll start to realize that there's certain bottlenecks that always become a problem, right? Like, you might realize, hey, I love, going out and hanging out in these, book clubs, let's say, but then they never actually turn into friendships. Like, what's the problem with that? And you might realize, okay, well, the bottleneck is that I never actually invite anybody into my life after we go to this, this book club or whatever the thing is. So then you realize, okay, now I need to work on that. And again, you're going to have a list, you're going to start to put it in order, you're going to have different activities that you want to try to do, and you'll start to see like, okay, there's certain activities that are super high leverage. And what I mean by that is if you do them twice as often as you're currently doing, you're going to see a lot more results, as opposed to going and walking around a park and there's other people there. Well, you might do that 100 times and never actually make another friend. But you might simply increase the amount of times that you walk up to somebody while you're at the park and say, hey, how's it going? My name's Marshall. What brought you out to the park today? Something as simple as that. You might only have to go to the park 2 or 3 times and make 2 or 3 interactions like that to make a friend, as opposed to going to the park 100 times and there being 100 people. Does that kind of make sense? I don't know if I'm explaining that very well. But essentially what I mean is there are going to be certain bottlenecks in your process as you see it, where you're like, okay, this is the part where I tend to get hung up. And this is where it starts to become very personal for you, because it won't be the same thing. The thing that hangs you up might not be the same thing that hangs me up. The thing that hangs somebody else up might not be what hangs you up. And you're going to have your own style of overcoming that bottleneck in the process. Maybe you don't like calling people on the phone. I know personally I'm not a big fan of calling people on the phone. I never have been on the phone a lot. So, hey, I do much better when I text people, right? Because texting feels like a lower barrier to entry. So I started texting people, and it helped me develop friendships better. If the option is no phone call versus a text will win, right? So I started incorporating that more into my process for making friends. So now what are we on? We're on number 4, number 5. Number 1, you're going to make a list of ways that you've made friends in the past. Number 2, you're going to make a list of ways that other people have made friends. Number 3, you're going to make a plan for which order you're going to do these. And number 4, you're going to increase the amount of the activities that you're going to do. Number 5, you're going to start to look and see, okay, well, which are the areas where as I'm increasing these, I'm running into these bottlenecks. Then you're going to start to fix those bottlenecks so that those are no longer bottlenecks. Maybe they become strengths, and you'll start to see those great results. And then lastly, what I'll say is you need a way to track your results and tweak them and get better over time. For me, a lot of times that's simply talking it through with my wife. We provide kind of a sounding board for each other, like, hey, how did that interaction go? Or, hey, it didn't go so well, what could we improve next time? I also like to journal these things. There's all sorts of ways that you can track your progress. And again, that'll be a personal thing for you of how you sort of like measure what worked well, or try to do more of the things that worked well. But over time and enough repetitions, you will see results. Things that work better than others, it just becomes a thing of increasing the odds or increasing the chances that you'll make friends. You're never going to have a complete system that like every time I do this exact thing, it makes a friend. Just like a salesperson doesn't have this exact script that every time they do this thing, it creates a sale. Friendships and relationships don't work like that. People don't work like that. But in the long term, in the aggregate, with enough repetitions, you can start to see these systems work, and they can work dependably to where if you say, hey, if I go through this system 100 times, I will make whatever it is, 12 friends. And you can start to track that. And that's where it gets exciting, at least for me, because I start to see like, okay, I have this system, I'm working the system, and I don't get discouraged when something doesn't work out because, hey, I'm just going through my system and I'm getting my system better. Try that out. That's kind of the way that I started with trying to figure out how to make friends myself, sort of how to make a system for making friends that was personal to me, and then that I could hopefully share with other people. And like I said at the beginning, if you'd like to check out my course on how to make a friend, it's called Friend in 10 Days. You can check it out in the description below. It kind of goes through the process that I use and I recommend. But if you're just starting out and you just want to try this on your own, this is the way to get started, to create a process that's personal to you and can get you there. In my next video, and I'll probably link it up here somewhere, I'm going to share the one sentence that if you memorize, if there's one thing that I would suggest learning, one sentence to memorize, it's this sentence. And it's going to help you transfer friends from people that you talk to and that you meet to people that you can keep up with and you can follow up with in the future. So check that out, and I'll talk to you later.